This week, we've got Jennifer Minella talking to us about mindfulness and security, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. We're going to talk about transformation, absolute zero-based budgeting, time management tips that actually work, ways you could be a more confident speaker. And in the news this week, FireEye, WatchGuard, First Alert, and ADT. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Business Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by, do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested these public assets? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 70. It is January 19, 2018. It is cold in Rhode Island, but not so cold. So I'm not in the beach. I actually have on shoes today and everything. And joining me side by side is my good friend and co-host, Paul Asadorian.
So cold I had to wear a hat.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I like a cooler studio. I mean, I feel good with it.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It's exciting times. It's been a fun week. This is one of those weeks where I've been in studio for most of the week. So you might have seen me in a couple of other types of programs, and it makes it a little bit easier, I think. I like it, side by side.
There's still an ongoing competition now for the person who's been on every single show.
We were talking about
that
this morning.
We've launched a new show. Actually, Doug next week will probably complete the rounds.
Complete the cycle first?
Yeah. Except for Tradecraft Security Weekly, but that's been exclusively Bo.
Yeah, and it will be.
Probably will be.
Yep. No, I'm working to get my badge too. I'll be back in studio in 2 weeks, and so we'll get a chance then to be able to take a look at it. Let me do a couple announcements. If you work in IT and you want to have access to an awesome library of on-demand training, you can go to our friends at itpro.tv/securityweekly. And we've talked about this a bunch of times. They have what they call the Supervisor Portal. It's a team solution. It gives you the ability to follow up on what people are training, to assign different training to them, and there's so much good content. We had a great conversation on Security Weekly last night with Adam from IT Pro TV. It was a lot of fun. Got us really talking at the end, and I think that, if nothing else, illustrated the type of content that you can get there, and he's got just tremendous experience, and I loved his presentation, the way he broke it down, made stuff accessible, and we talked about the ability to have a home lab and the need to have a home lab and what you can do with that and how to work on it, and you can do that. So if you use code SECWeekly30, that's in our show notes, SECWeekly30, it's kind of like all one word, you get a 7-day free trial, and you get 30% off the lifetime of your subscription. And I think the thing we keep talking about with this, Paul, is it's not just for certifications. It's for anything that you want to be conversant on, anything you want to understand, anything that you need to work with, you get that opportunity. You can also check out our on-demand material. This is typically, Paul, where you say, Michael, tell us about our on-demand. But
Michael, tell us about our on-demand
I'm going to go ahead and handle
program.
it. Yeah, I was going to say, let me just go ahead and handle that for us. It's one of those things that we're looking at as we continue to work on our programming and solving the problems. What has captured me working with you, Paul, and our entire team here is a lot of this is driven from the desire and the need to solve problems that each of us face on the practitioner side of stuff. And our webcast program has done that. And a bunch of you said, hey, I love doing the live stuff. I love interacting and asking questions and getting them answered. And the no fluff approach, the type of stuff that we do. And we're getting ready to release some on-demand content. And so we have some in there now based on some of the great webcasts that we did last year. And what you'll see over the next 30 to 45 days is a couple different styles of our on-demand webcasts coming out. So if you're interested in that type of stuff, you want to watch on a schedule that works for you, go to securityweekly.com/on-demand, give that a try, and there's going to be more coming up on that later. But let's get to our interview, because I think, God, I'd be shocked if you're watching this and you don't know JJ. Jennifer Minella is, she's absolutely fantastic and one of the smartest people I've ever met, and a lot of fun to be around, and a fellow Southerner. In fact, I can only say that now, Jen, because I've had anchor babies. So I'm a Southerner
Oh,
now.
is that how it works?
It's like naturalized Southerner
Yeah.
is kind of the way that it works. I petitioned and everything, and it all works out. But in the rare event you don't know JJ, our friend JJ, she's VP of Engineering, Carolina Advanced Digital. So there, keeps her hands still very much on the keyboards, doing strategic research and consulting for government, education, Fortune 100, 500 corporations. Trust me, she does a lot more than that. She's a published author. She's a consultant, internationally recognized speaker, and a lot of fun. But what she's been working on, what we're going to talk about today, is introducing mindful-based leadership to individuals and organizations in information security. She's also a competitive powerlifter, a dancer. She loves Figment, the Imagination Dragon. She's a fun person to be around, and she's our friend. So Jennifer, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Hi, guys. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So one of the things you're doing is you're speaking this year at InfoSec World, and you're introducing the concept of mindfulness in security and mindful leadership. And when Paul and I were talking about it, Paul said, cool, what's mindfulness? And I think that's probably a pretty common question. So when you're introducing this concept of mindfulness, let's start with what's mindfulness and what's the problem that we're trying to solve that mindfulness is our answer?
All right. Well, that's a loaded question because I think we each have our definition, and they're different, but none of them are wrong, and maybe all of them are right in different ways. So, when I talk about mindfulness, it's really fundamentally, it's about just kind of being aware and pausing, and being aware of it has a few different meanings for me. It can, obviously there's in security, we're aware of our surroundings and we're aware of everything else, but mindfulness really takes that to a different level. It's being present. It's really paying attention to every aspect of what's going on with you, with the people that are around you, with the world. And the problems that it solves are really myriad. So at the personal level, we see that mindfulness and the things that you do to train yourself to be mindful really help people with everything from health issues, depression. I came into it because I had some heart issues, and that was my path out of taking medicine. Other people have said they've been able to stop taking, sleep meds, ADD meds, antidepressant meds. So at a very personal level, there's that. Then as you start to talk about yourself as a professional or human interacting with others, then you can start to translate those things into how can I figure out what I'm passionate about and pursue that, whether it's personal and professional. And then it's how do I start to restructure my day and my life to reach those goals? Again, personal, professional. So there you can take all of these things down at the micro level, and you can take them up to a macro level within a large organization and get a lot more out of yourself, out of your team, and really out of the whole company.
I love that. I've always looked at it as it's creating that space, right? It's understanding that we have an emotional reaction to things, and that's okay. But if you can get yourself that little bit of space, that little bit of distance. So when you look at it, and that list of benefits is impressive, how does somebody get started? I mean, right? Because most of us either, it's not going to work for me, or I just don't have time. So when somebody might be predisposed against it, and they're too busy, where do they start?
There's a lot of paths into it, and I think everybody has defined their own path and what resonates with them. So, my personal path, which I wouldn't expect a lot of other people to share, was, again, I had a heart issue. I was in my early 20s. I ended up taking Tai Chi Qigong, which is that, the slow movement Asian style you see, which has to do with moving chi, which led me to Qigong, which is a meditative practice, and then it kind of grew from there. Other people, sometimes it's just breathing exercises. Sometimes it's a stress or an anger management tool set that gets them to that point. Sometimes it's certain types of music even. And really what it comes down to, because you hit the nail on the head, where people say, I don't need it. And if you don't think you need it, I'm definitely not going to push somebody into it. But if you feel like you need it, and you're one of these IT pros or security pros that says, I can't do it. My brain, you people, yes, that makes sense for you. You tree hugging hippies, but me, I'm an IT pro. I'm an engineer. I'm smart. I'm running these things. My brain goes 200 miles an hour all the time, and I simply can't do this. And if you can get over that hump, and you can translate the can't do, if you have to want to do it, and then you have to decide that there is a path to do it. And I always joke that everybody wants to be a snowflake, and we're all little snowflakes. We're all a little special. So we each have our thing, and finding the path into doing that is really just as simple as taking a breath, like just being able to sit still for a minute, and for us to not be looking at the phone every 10 seconds, to not be looking at our email every 20 seconds in case we're going to miss something, or Twitter or Facebook, to just cut that all out, even if it's just for 5 minutes, and sitting there with your eyes open, your eyes closed, and just breathing. Like, that's the first thing.
Now, you've been doing this for a while, but when you guide other people into it, how quickly do they realize benefits, and how much practice or repetition do they need before they really start to unlock more benefit?
That varies with every person, and so it's a bad practice to say you should expect this experience or these results in this time frame. I've seen people that sat down, and again, in those first 3 breaths, because a lot of times when we lead these sessions, we just say, hey, let's just all come here, drop whatever we were thinking about over there, especially to conference, and relax, and let's take 3 breaths. A lot of times that simple activity is enough for somebody to go, wow, I felt that. That's different. Other people, it could be that you need several sessions, weeks, months before you really start to notice something.
So either way, stick with it. If you're getting good results, do more of it. You were talking too about the time. I tried to look it up quick and I couldn't remember it. It was Walt Whitman or somebody else made some sort of a quote about, sit for 30 minutes in nature every day, and if you're too busy, sit for an hour. It was,
yes.
So I love your point on, if you don't think it's right for you, I'm not going to push you into it. But what I also find is if you don't think you have time for it, that's probably a sign of you really need to make the time for it in order to be able to do that. So I think that's kind of interesting. So you gave me this other thing then, and I'm kind of curious where this fits, because I think a lot of times if people hear mindfulness, they automatically think meditation. If we think meditation, a lot of people will go right to Zen or Buddhism or Zen Buddhism and all sorts of stuff. And you said that there's Buddhism adoption in tech and infosec. It's a thing. What's the thing, Jennifer? Sorry.
It is a thing. When you call me Jennifer, I feel like I'm in trouble. My mom.
I'm sorry. You know what it is? I never
trouble.
shorten Michael to Mike, so I'm always and I've always mostly just called you JJ. So.
Yeah, Jen, JJ, even bitch. That's better than Jennifer. Give it
Okay.
3 syllables. Something bad's
I'll
happening.
probably avoid that one, but I will talk myself off of Jennifer.
Okay.
All right, so tell me, Buddhism adoption in tech and infosec.
Yep, that is a thing. So I'm not shy about sharing this. I'm Buddhist. I'm full Buddhist, vows and everything, kind of Buddhist. There are a lot of people who I think have found their path in to meditation through Buddhist practices. And that doesn't mean that you're changing your religion or anything else. If you go into a Buddhist center, a lot of it is about just helping people being that, I hate to say gateway drug, but being that kind of gateway path into changing yourself, or just finding other people. If you're struggling with something, that's a great place. But you walk in and you see people that are from all walks of life, all cultures, all social backgrounds, all religions, and they're just there to kind of explore themselves and share and learn. So there's a lot of conferences that are, conferences, resources, groups that are specific to Buddhism in the IT space. Not necessarily security, but IT as a whole. So that's a thing. And I think the attraction there is extremely non-judgmental. And I don't want to get into a religious conversation, but I do know that we work in an industry with a lot of people who are either agnostic or atheist. It's not always accepted everywhere. And certainly a lot of these people wouldn't walk into a church and say, hey, I'm ready to self-reflect a little bit or get some help, because that's not in line with their core values. And so I think Buddhism is very open and accepting. It's something that teaches you to take what you want and leave what you don't. So they don't force anything down your throat. They lay things out there and they say, hey, if any of this helps you, keep coming back and taking it. If you don't like parts of it, that's fine. Bring what you want to.
Well, and what I love about this is it's that self-awareness. And so there's a lot of discussion now about leading with empathy. And a lot of times, in order to understand somebody else, you have to understand yourself first. And so I keep looking at this as, this is fantastic in security today, because a lot of our problems, they're not technical problems. We can figure out the tech. It's our ability to understand the people around us and communicate with them in a way that they get it. So have you found that, I mean, I've known you for a long time, so I know I almost felt like you were naturally good at this in terms of communicating with other people, but then as you introduce mindfulness to others, does it benefit their leadership, or do you find that their security teams then either build better relationships or get better decisions? Like, if somebody listening to this right now said, I wonder if I should do it with my team, and I've seen teams go through this, what kind of benefits would they expect? I know everybody's different, but what kinds of things have you seen that come as a result of this?
Well, a lot of the benefits are, I would say, very parallel to your traditional leadership qualities. So if you look at, I love throwing out there the company, the Table Group. The founder of that wrote a lot of really good books around leading an organization, communicating and developing these skills. And, I don't think anywhere he specifically says mindfulness, but if you take the skill set that these leadership and organizational structure books are giving you, and you kind of work backwards from that and say, how do I get to a point where I can respond instead of react? How can I be empathetic? How can I build EQ? And I think for us, the first thing is to be okay with, I hate the word soft skills, but to be okay with to be okay with knowing that, technical street cred is one thing, and to be technically competent is phenomenal. The scary part for me jumping from here to there is just that. It's because these skills aren't chic, they're not cool, and people think they're very soft and squishy, but the data is behind them. And to answer your question, I guess specifically, I think a really good example is, my company does a lot of network access control projects. They're usually very expensive. This is a high budget, long-term, cross-functional. So we're working with everything from, the people that are managing servers, end users in a healthcare environment. There can be clinical liaisons and healthcare professional liaisons, the caregivers, in addition to your network security team, your network team and your security team. And these things are messy. They're expensive. Most people don't want to be involved in them. And it's really interesting. Yeah, they fail a lot, not ours, but other people's fail. So the interesting thing for me was walking in, and I think this is where I finally came to the conclusion that, hey, at an organizational level, there's a place for this. Not only is there a place for this, but I really feel like we have to do this. So I walk in, and my role in these projects now, where it was, on the keyboard, is more dealing with the people. It's the, the layer 8 and the layer 9. It's going in there and taking the network team that wants nothing to do with this sometimes, and getting them on the same page as the security team, and fostering communication. That doesn't mean ferreting stuff back and forth between them. It means bringing them together and working through all of those interpersonal issues that everybody has, all of the preconceived notions. And this is where I really feel that applied mindfulness, which is based in neuroscience. This isn't, it's not fairy dust and magic cauldrons, witch cauldrons and things. This is science. And that's what we have to get to, is we can take this science, and I'm going to call it mindfulness for now, and we're going to apply it in the organization, and we can get the results that we need in these projects.
Yeah, I mean, think about it simply. If in so many of these projects, if we just took a pause, the length of 3 breaths, there's so much reaction that creates so much friction. We'd have a complete difference. But you said something I thought was interesting in that. And so we agree. When you call it soft skills, for me, that's the nails on the chalkboard. And I always quip back, if they were soft, they'd be a lot easier to attain. And I think for a lot of people that they struggle with them. But you also then brought up knack. And I mean, I think people that have known you have been impressed by your technical prowess for years. And it might even be a surprise for some people for you to talk about mindfulness or to look at it in that particular way. So what's that been like for you? Because you've also prided yourself on your technical ability, and now you're kind of looking at it saying, look, I still know the tech. I've still got that cred, but you've kind of embraced, the success that's going to come from working with people. The success is going to come from bringing people together, and that path of mindfulness has given you that. So what's that journey been like for you? Was that an easy transition? Are you still in that transition, and do you struggle with it?
Yes, 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 and yes. So yeah, I'm in that transition because, I think we've had this conversation, and Michael, you and I have had this conversation.
A lot.
You've got daughters. This came up at a panel, I think at an ISC Squared event somewhere, where, as a female in the industry, we tend to want to over credential ourselves, just so that everybody knows we didn't get that role or that opportunity because we were female and somebody had a diversity requirement. We worked for it. Like we want to know it inside out, right? So, from the technical side, I came from starting in the industry when I was 14, and I served on my first technical state government agency advisory board when I was 16, and I never had problems, being a female from the perspective of like men treating me poorly, or being disrespectful. But I did feel the need to really overqualify myself with certifications. I wanted to learn the skills and do that. So yeah, the change to this is kind of hard and scary, because even a lot of my friends, if I were to say to them, here's Annie, and Annie is somebody who does organizational health and brings mindfulness to organizations. To most of my friends, I know the comments, right? I know the comments because they would have been my comments as well, and I would have thought they were funny, and we would have joked, and we would have been like, oh well, what's that person doing here? So it's hard for me because I'm an insider, and I know the attitude of these people towards these type of skill sets, but maybe that uniquely positions me to bring them to my friends, my colleagues, my peers. But yeah, it's hard because, my reputation is built on very, very, very technical networking and wireless security technologies. And, to say, I'm going to not do that. And instead I'm going to do this other squishy thing. And then be that person and lose your identity as somebody. Again, I've been doing this since I was 14. It's scary as shit. And you don't know when you get up in front of somebody in a security conference how it's going to be accepted. I was overwhelmingly happy when Mike Rothman and I took this to RSA with the neurohacking talk the first time. I was scared to death. I mean, he was my security blanket there. Being a male, and he's well respected, and it made me much more comfortable than doing it myself. But everybody received it so well, and then we got asked more and more for it, and the customers are asking for it. So those customers we're doing large projects for that know that I have this interest and do some of these other things over here. They're saying, hey, you know what? I still like you to do these talks at these events, but hey, can you also do a mindfulness talk?
That's
I think
awesome.
We need that. Yeah.
I love it when that works, and I know from my experience talking about things like communication or leadership, I always feel like I don't know if this is going to go over well. And you get to the end, and I go, hey, can we do more of that? So I like seeing that, and I like that transition. I think it's interesting too because a lot of people, when they start to hit leadership positions, it's that you said something I hadn't previously considered. What I've looked at is it's always that you're not responsible for yourself anymore. Your success is largely determined by how the team does. But you also pointed out our identities get tied up in how we've defined ourselves in our careers. And when you're moving into a position of leadership and you need to go influence, and especially we look a lot lately at influence without authority, I think it's where that mindfulness comes in. But you're also a bit of a competitor. So you do competitive dance, and now you do competitive powerlifting. So like, does that feed a side of your leadership? And how does that the competitive nature then work with the mindfulness? Then how do they both incorporate into security?
It's too many questions at once. Yes. So
I like compound questions.
You're gonna have to remind me halfway through. I am blonde. Anybody that knows me knows I'm very competitive, and it's kind of like Jekyll and Hyde with me sometimes because I have this very compassionate, empathetic side, and then I have this very snarky and competitive side. But that doesn't mean you're two different people, right? You have to find the intersection of those things and then apply them appropriately. So at a powerlifting meet or a dance competition or whatever you're doing that's competitive, and you notice all of my sports really in competition have been individual contributor sports. Like I've done cheerleading, but everything else that I've done, gymnastics, dance, powerlifting, everything else has been me competing, right? Not as a group. So that probably speaks a little bit to to that, and how I push myself. A lot of it is just challenging and pushing yourself for things. Now, what was the second part of your question?
Well, it was more about how that works then with mindfulness. Like, do you find that your mindfulness improves your competitiveness when you're
Oh, Lord,
doing these things?
yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so, case in point, and my husband hates it when I talk about him, but you just get over that. So, my husband is Dave. He's also a competitive power lifter and a bodybuilder. So he's very regimented and
Yeah, I
has a lot
use
of
him as my
self-control.
after picture. Like, if people want to know
Yes.
what I look like, I go, here, it's kind of like him, but different.
hmm And so it's really interesting because we don't usually work out together, but he's very experienced in this. He's put some of my programs together. When I got into this, he was my coach originally. And when he works out, he's fueled by rage and anger and all of those things, and that works for him. Like, that works for him. When I do it, I am so calm. Like, I'm breathing and I'm focusing and I'm using that energy differently, and it's really funny. So I pull from mindfulness even when I'm trying to squat 300 pounds, because that's what works for me. That's what centers me. That's what grounds me. That's what makes me feel most in touch and able to kind of dig deep and pull something out that I normally wouldn't be able to do. So yes.
I love that a lot, actually. Do you find that, one more question as I was listening to you, by having some of these more competitive outlets, do you then feel a need to compete less in the business place? Like, does that give you an outlet where you don't feel like everything at work is a competition? Maybe you never did. I'm thinking broader for other people, but
Yeah, I really don't see my work as a competition. There's nobody doing exactly what I do in work. And so the people that work on my team, and I get really annoyed when one of them says they work for me, because that's not how I function. But, one of the team members, I think that's probably another place where mindfulness comes in. And I have, so for the InfoSec world, the CISO Leadership Summit, all of how this applies to leadership skills, we'll be talking about that. But I think one of the big things was, a long story kind of compressed short, is I was supposed to be managing people. I walked into, after being an engineer. So I was an engineer, an individual contributor, and then I was managing people. And that did not work well for anybody. I hated life. They hated life. Life sucked for everyone. It was not smooth. It was not pretty. It was horrible. And I found myself reacting instead of responding to things, which made it worse. And
Jen,
so,
what's the difference for people? Because I'm familiar with the difference, but what's the difference between a reaction and a response?
Okay, that's a great question. And I think it's an important one. So when you react, you see something, and it triggers something, and there's different layers that spiral out of what that looks like. But you said something earlier, Michael, about an emotional response. So the first thing you get is an emotional response, and in Buddhism they actually have ways to describe this as being positive, negative, or neutral. So you have an emotional response. If you are reacting to that, it's going to be a different outcome and a different feeling with that person than if you take the time to stop, be mindful, and you think about everything and then you respond. And what I mean by thinking about everything is, sometimes, well, especially in email, you read something and the way that the person that wrote the email meant it is not how you took it when you read it. And maybe that's because you're angry. Maybe you have some friction with this person or the situation or project, or maybe you just misread it, or maybe you don't know exactly where they're coming from. Maybe you read it the right way, but you don't really know where they're coming from with it. And you make a decision about what you think they meant by it, or where you think they're coming from, or why they did it. And there's an attribution error there, right? Like, then you're pissed about that and you react to that instead of stopping. And that's really the thing, is that stopping, that pausing, that leaving the space and time, being mindful, and playing devil's advocate. I mean, I think one of the things, if we want to proclaim to be great debaters, if we're saying we can argue any side of anything, that's a great debater. You can argue even against your own views. And that's a skill I developed over a long time. But stop and think about it. What could this person mean, even if it's not in line with my views of what I think it means from them? And just pausing and not having a knee-jerk reaction to it that's emotional or driven by something that you've made an assumption about, in an error in attribution about, and fact-finding or being very calm and judicious and maybe getting some more information from the person before you fire that email off.
Yeah, I think right there, if people take that to heart and just try that even a little bit after listening to this, you'll start to find that it gets you such a different total outcome, because it's just that slowing stuff down. Like, because think about it, at least my experience, Jen, has always been that when somebody does, like when they react, that creates more reaction, and then we dwell on it, and it becomes this consuming fire that rips it all apart. So people can see you at InfoSec World, and you'll be giving them some better tips and strategies and things with that. And then you've got a second talk there too, right? You're coupling this into looking at how to do change better.
Yes.
Are they connected talks, or are you keeping them a little separate?
They're separate. They're separate topics. I mean, there's definitely a mindfulness and a leadership component that can be applied to building a change culture. But as somebody who kind of swims through change like a shark does through water, I have to keep doing that. I've learned a lot of lessons about balancing that with the people. So my peer in my company, her name's Julie. She's kind of the other way. Like, she doesn't like change. A lot of people are like that. And so it's very great to start to explore people like that and find a balance with things, and then come to a consensus about what level of change is healthy, right? Because just change for the sake of change isn't necessarily healthy, but doing something just because that's how you've always done it is not healthy. So it's really about finding that middle place, and then, leveraging communication and working through complexities to get people, groups, and then entire organizations comfortable through working through change.
Jen, I just a couple of points before we close out the interview. I too also studied Tai Chi and Qigong, and being a security professional and kind of the mindset of security professionals, I was very skeptical until I tried it, and I was like, wow, that's really not bullshit.
Yeah, no, it's different.
So from personal experience, I'll back up your some of your viewpoints you stated earlier. The other thing, now, Jen, you do something similar to what we do here in Rhode Island in working with Cyber Patriot students. Tell us about that.
I do, and I was going to wear my team sweatshirt, but it was a little too warm. Yeah, so I'm a Cyber Patriot mentor, but I think a big part of my mentoring is finding out what the kids need, and then going out and finding other professionals and coordinating. So we took a resource in our office, and he's kind of helping run air traffic control. So he works with the school and their coach, and then the professionals, and we kind of have like a little group and a Slack channel and everything. And it's been really fantastic. So we get feedback from the kids. They actually did a full capture the flag recently, and learned a lot with that. So it's been great. We put on a conference for them that's run parallel or part of our company's conference. So we do that for free for them. And actually for all of the Cyber Patriot students in North Carolina, they're invited to come for free.
We do the same thing here in Rhode Island. Imagine that.
Yeah.
No, I love it. And you know what I always love about this?
I heard you talking about that. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I always love how when you guys do this, a lot of us will start with, well, this will be good for the kids. This is, it's for the children. Always better for us. I love the questions that they ask. I love the things they come up with. I love the way that they look at things from a completely different perspective. I think if you do this and you don't come away with a new insight or a little bit more passion for what we do, then you should do it more, because you can. You will. Oh, yeah.
And we open it up to security professionals as well to come mingle with the students. Obviously, we're somewhat selective, of that. But it is an open invitation, and there were great, conversations between, the kids and security professionals and amongst security professionals about how we can better help the kids. So, that's all.
They're smarter than we are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So as long as you can handle that as a professional, then you're fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can handle that. Everybody's smarter than me. I've gotten comfortable with that. Jen, it's always a blast talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly. And where can people check you out? Obviously, you'll be at InfoSec World, but if they want to learn more about you and mindfulness, what's the best way for them to follow along with all the things that you're doing?
That's a good question. So I have the Security Uncorked website, and that's where all of my technical content has been. What I'm figuring out how to do right now is take that and maybe archive that somewhere because there's a lot of resources, and start to put this here, put some of this topic there. So the Security Uncorked website, I do post stuff on Facebook as well that's public, usually related to mindfulness, and then I am on Twitter as JJX. So I'm starting to get back on that platform a little bit more than I was.
Well, good. I look forward to interacting with you there, and hopefully we'll get to see you again in person real soon. Actually, I guess at InfoSec World.
At InfoSec World, because you'll be there, right?
Yeah. I wasn't gonna go this year, JJ. And
every
Paul,
time we're on the air, I'm like, Michael, you're gonna be there, right?
So I guess I'll see you at InfoSec World this year. So
you are going.
So I guess Paul talked to you beforehand. Yeah, I mean, look, I blocked it off on my calendar, so that means I'm clear to go. I think.
You got to check with the boss.
Going.
Yeah, I'm gonna double check with the boss that it's okay, and as long as it's good with her, then yes, we'll go.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see you there, Jen.
Yeah. No, it's always great. So thanks, and I hope everybody gets a chance to try out some more mindfulness. You can check out Jen at all the places she said. At JJX is the Twitter, because I can always remember that one. It's easy. You can see her at InfoSec World. And with that, we'll take a short break. We'll come back, and we've got some articles for discussion.